What is up, ladies and gentlemen of the online Jamily? This, of course, here is Jamiroquai 2000 with another episode of The Beginner's Guide to Jamiroquai. Given the recent influx of a lot of new music fans into the online Jamily from either the recurring Jamiroquai memes ecosystem or purely from music discovery, I thought it was the right time to write and record this new post-video series to help all those new music fans get an introduction to the music of Jamiroquai, from the past to present history to the musical influence of the band to the band members of the past and present, to further enrich their exploration of the 30 years of Jamiroquai into the band of Jamiroquai. Here in episode 4 of this recurring series, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into all 8 studio albums, their meanings of their lyrical and compositional directions that have so far been released by Jamiroquai through 2 different record label contract deals with Sony Music and then Universal Music over the past 30 years, their musical activity, and then touch on the invaluable single releases that complemented and embodied those albums of each period. First off, here in section 1, we're going to start looking at the deep dive of all 8 Jamiroquai studio albums. Now, Jamiroquai's first album release, of course, was Emergency on Planet Earth, which was their debut album as an English funk and acid jazz band, going by the name, of course, by Jamiroquai, released on June 14th, 1993, under the Sony Soho Square. Prior to its release, the Jamiroquai debuted in 1992 with When You Gonna Learn under Acid Jazz Record, and frontman JK was given a major record deal with Sony Music. Of course, the album was produced by Jay, formed the band, and characterized it from its acid jazz foundations, layers of instrumentation, and socially charged lyrics. The lead single, the aforementioned When You Gonna Learn, and its binary B-side, Too Young to Die, railed against the human abuses of planet Earth more wholeheartedly than any other bands of their period. A daring, creative opening musical salvo for such a young, doe-eyed flock of a band. While JK was sending songs to record labels, he wrote the first track, When You Gonna Learn, after taking inspiration from the Native American and First Nation peoples that their philosophies and from their anger towards the shooting of elephants in a television program. The song also takes on everything from racism to corporate greed, according to Interview. Kay said that the track laid down the sound and the flavor and the concept of the album. After he had it recorded, Jay fought with its producer, who took half of the lyrics and produced the song based on what was charting at the time. With the track restored to its preference, the experience helped Kay realize he wanted a proper live band with a proper live sound. Kay gradually gathered band members, including Wallace Buchanan, who played the Yiraki, or the Whites Under the Didgeridoo, and Stuart Zender, who became the band's bassist by audition. Kay's manager scouted keyboardist Toby Smith, who joined the band as Kay's songwriting partner. Together, they wrote the song, the second track, of course, as aforementioned, Too Young to Die, a song also inspired by Kay's anger towards the wars that he had seen on television. Regarding how the track was written, JK said in 2013, I have a very limited musical ability in terms of playing, so he would sing the instruments as Smith would work out the chords. The 2 tracks would shape up the album. They follow up to the high-kicking funk track Hooked Up. The 4th track, If I Like It, I Do It, Kay said it was reminded him of Harvest of the World by the Isley Brothers. The former song's lyrics have been described by Anarchist, which was a magazine. The kids want the system breaking down, no higher education. If they ain't no natural law, then you can keep your regulations. The track Music of the Mind was a laid-back Latin fusion track that takes inspiration by Flora Purim's song Moon Dreams. With the title track, Kay said it was ultimately... with the title track, J.K. said it ultimately defined the concept of the album. Quote, the whole groove of it, all the syncopation, the strings gliding over the top, and the lyrics were to hammer the nail. The kids need an education and the streets are never clean. Is that life and I'm witnessing, or just another wasted birth? Kay wanted to recreate the Headhunters song God Made Me Funky with the track Whatever It Is, I Just Can't Stop, and he credits having a real drummer for its funky feel. The track Blow Your Mind was a soft track intended for at least 8.5 minutes long. The track was recorded in one take. JK said in reflection of the song, quote, the brass was feeling so nice that when we got to the end, I didn't want it to stop, so I motioned the guys to go on again, which is why there is a reprise. For the 10-minute track Revolution 1993, the track has paramilitary drums and a grinding bass. With lyrics, Kay said, it rounded off all the other things like saying in the album. And it also crisscross ascending and descending lines, James Brown like brass punches, a female rhythm and blues choir, Mitchell-esque type drums, African percussion, upfront bass, and elements of hip hop, fusion, acid jazz, techno pop, and ragamuffin. The album ends with the didgeridoo workout, of course, one of the best tracks that ended up a Jamiroquai album on a track called Digin' Out. Now, the second album release from Jamiroquai would be, of course, called Return of the Space Cowboy. The album was released on October 17th, 1994 under Soho Square, Sony Soho Square, excuse me, that's a little bit of a limerick. The album continues the musical direction of their debut, 1993's Immersive on Planet Earth, and is characterized by its complex songwriting as a result of JK's creative block mid-production. Its lyrics address street life, hope, the loss, JK's drug use, and social matters regarding Native Americans and youth protest. The album was recorded at Townhouse, Battery, and Falconer Studios. As the band started to record, K suddenly fell into the second album syndrome, worsening with his increasing drug use. The songwriting process was complex for the band, and Kay had often been dissatisfied with the results, leading to songs to be scrapped or even rewritten. He also struggled with the writing lyrics because suddenly I wasn't homeless and I had everything I needed, so I found myself creating problems I write about. The Latin-tinged song Stillness in Time was written when Kay was at his lowest point at recording of the album. He also said that the sweetness of the song was really wishful thinking. I hoped that things would get better. The track Half the Man was a mid-tempo track that Kay's twin brother who had died shortly after birth. Quote by JK, in the sense I always wanted to, it was always have a part of me being missing, and it also doubles up nicely as a love song. With the band's songwriting going forth between harder and softer songs, they shifted to writing a track called Light Years, a track described as by JK as being a very heavy vibe. The fifth track, Manifest Destiny, was a mellow song with a bass heavy coda, which was written by Jay, when Jay had written the book Bury at the Heart of Wounded Knee, telling the mistreatment and the massacres of Native Americans. The sixth track, The Kids, was an aggressive track with mariachi band trumpets and snapping bass, meant to capture the feeling of the streets, and is all about the youth protests against the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994. The bill had been outlawing unrestricted raves. That is the only track that Nick Van Gelder ended up playing drums on. The seventh track, Mr. Moon, is a love song with incredibly complex chord structures about a girl whom Jay met at a rave and ended up going with Jake, going with the band's keyboardist Toby Smith. The following track, Scam, is said to have feature orchestral arrangements with which Rich Tufu and Johnny Pate once strayed Curtis Mayfield's soul protest funk into a stark grace. The next track, Journey to Arnhem was an instrumental that featured didgeridoo playing. The ninth track, Morning Glory, according to BBC Music, was a laid-back, blissed-out joy, perfect come-down music with percussion darting from speaker to speaker. Halfway through the recording of the album, Kay found his turning point was to write the final track, Space Cowboy, which while his drug use at the time was completely out of control and him losing his mind. He would further say in 2013, quote, everyone thinks it's a nice song about getting stoned, but for me, it went much deeper. Was it about me or somebody else? Was it about marijuana or cocaine? Was it about someone who was lost, trying to hang on and come back before he drifted into a black hole, never to be seen again? Space Cowboy gave us the momentum to push on and finish what I think was one of the most creative and accomplished albums of the Jamiroquai discography. Jamiroquai's third album, which of course would end up being their biggest best-selling album of all time, of course, is 1996 album Traveling Without Moving. The album was released in Japan on August 28th of 1996 in Japan. It was released in the United Kingdom on September 6th of 1996 under the Sony Soho Square record label. Frontman JK intended for this album to have a more universal style revolving from cars, life, and love. Critics have generally praised the album for being more focused and refined from the band's previous work, while the others panned its lyrics and found the album to be too derivative. Kay also faced backlash from the press for his use of sports cars in this period, despite of his environmental beliefs. The album was Jamiroquai's American breakthrough. It marked the first entry into the U.S. Billboard 200 chart at number 24. In the U.K., it peaked at number 2. Its singles Virtual Insanity, Cosmic Girl, and All Right entered the top 10 in the U.K. Album sales chart, single sales charts. In the U.S., All Right ended the Billboard Hot 100 at number 78, while Cosmic Girl and High Times were in the top 10 of the dance club song charts. The music video for Virtual Insanity contributed to the band's greatest success. Traveling on Moving would go on to sell over 8 million albums, 8 million copies worldwide, holding the Guinness Book of World Records record of the best-selling funk album in history. After experiencing a stressful period while recording Return to the Space Cowboy, Kay sought to make a next album more focused and universal. He did not want to remain as a semi-underground act. Quoting J.K., that stuck in its little niche and sold only 1.5 albums every time. I wanted to break out and be something bigger, more international. Speaking of the album's general mood, Kay said, "With Emergency on Planet Earth, we weren't cheering." People weren't cheering in the streets, and with Return of the Space Cowboy was quite sad. With Traveling on Moving, I decided it was more important to show people we could enjoy ourselves. That's why it's cars, life, and love. The first song composed for the album was Virtual Insanity, which was recorded in a rough demo and was not fully realized until the band's final recording stages. The song had a piano opening with buoyant keyboards and soaring strings. Its lyrics were all about the prevalence of technology and the replication and simulation of life. The second track, Cosmic Girl, was a disco song with a spacey lyrics with its rhythm, looped beats to give an off-center, otherworldly sound. For the next track, Use the Force, the band channels the real vintage football vibe, filled with horns, wah-wah guitar, and a rippling barrage of Latin percussion. The fourth track, Every Day, is described as seductive as a Maxwell ballad and has over-aching strings and a come-hither bass line. The fifth song, All Right, was described as an easygoing disco funk track. The track High Times was a song with razor-edged funky guitars referencing JK's drug use during the recording of the Return of the Space Cowboy. High Times was admitting the truth of the matter, and this is where it had been and how lucky it was to come out of the other side. This is followed by the real awesome reggae track Drifting Along. The two instrumental tracks that complemented after Drifting Along, Digirama and Digital Vibrations, are instrumental tracks containing ambient didgeridoo. The title track is the next on the album that samples JK's Purple Lamborghini in the intro. It features a driving group of 2 minutes, and then it transitions into a bassline-paced heavy workout. The album ends with the dance track You Are My Love and the beautiful soul ballad Spend a Lifetime. Now, Jamiroquai's fourth studio album, which would be called Synchronize, and it was released on June 8th of 1999 through the Work Group in the United States and on June 14th, 1999 by S2 Records in the UK. Bassist Stuart Zender had left during this album-making process, and Nick Fife was hired as a replacement. This album contains a lot of elements of funk, acid jazz, and disco elements. The album recording sessions began at JK's Buckinghamshire home studio called Chillington in 1998. About 9 tracks were recorded, but the band's bassist, Stuart Zender, left partway through the recording in late 1998. J.K. hired a replacement, Nick Fife, who had previously played with Jamiroquai in a cover band, and the band ended up being re-recorded. The revised album was finished and released within 6 months. Synchronize is the band's last album to feature didgeridoo player Wallace Buchanan. The opening track, Can't Heat, was a svelte, chic organization strings, a percolating bass line, and a stomping four-on-the-floor rhythm. The second track, Planet Home, is a straight bass-driven track that has techno influences with a ghostly ambient harmonies and bone-shaking synth bass, and then out of nowhere, Latin hustle breakdown. The next track, Black Capricorn Day, has a driving bass groove with sassy horn injections which intend to stutter like the record on a turntable, with its lyrics being about being depressed. The lyrics of the fourth track, Soul Education, is about having an instinctive understanding of universal truths, as Kay confirmed in an interview with Music, quote, "A soul education is what you're born with," and the song's lyrics say, "Life formation, it's all on the breeze." Falling is a bass-driven acid jazz ballad track with lyrics dedicated to Kay's then-girlfriend, Denise Van Outen, which is followed by Destitute Illusion, an instrumental track swamped in layer upon layer of antique analog synthesizers and with the scratching of DJ Desire. The seventh track, Supersonic, has a didgeridoo and dobro drone against electronic percussion with a squidgling synth bass, which all builds to a hallucinogenic mid-song samba break. The breezy track, Butterfly, has a wobbly bass line that rises up and swamps the chorus. The multi-rhythmic song, Where Do We Go From Here, has an energetic progression broken by catchy and uplifting choruses with a staccato interplay and a horn section and guitarist Simon Katz. The album closes with the bittersweet song King for a Day, which has dramatic piano and synthetic strings and lyrics referencing to the departure of that said former bassist of Jamiroquai, Stuart Zender. Now, Jamiroquai's fifth album, A Funk Odyssey, would see a major music landscape change for the band Jamiroquai. The album was released on September 3rd, 2001 in the United Kingdom through Sony Square, Soho Square, and released September 11th, 2001 by Epic Records in the United States. Combining the elements of funk, disco, and electronica, the release of the album represented the peak of international commercial success for Jamiroquai, and in the ensuing world tour, the group would become a household name in many countries. The sleeve art of A Funk Odyssey features J.K. posed in front of a series of lasers, making it the first Jamiroquai album not to feature the Buffalo Man on its album cover. In a 2001 interview with Billboard magazine, Jay said he wrote the deliberately simple first song Little L in only 25 minutes. Quoting J.K., "It would have been easy to overthink and overwrite the song because it's incredibly simple, but that would have killed it." He described the fourth single, Corner of the Earth, as a spiritual song that speaks for anyone who's in a place or in a moment where they're happy. For the 10th track, Picture of My Life, Jay said, quote, "I cried throughout the process of writing that song, and it was an act looking at major personal problems and understanding of lingering effects." Now, Jamiroquai's sixth album, which would be released on, called Dynamite, would be released on June 15th, 2005 in Japan, June 20th, 2005 in the United Kingdom, and July 21st, 2005 in Australia, and September 20th of 2005 in the United States. The album was released after the 2004 film Napoleon Dynamite features the Jamiroquai song Canned Heat and its climactic dance sequence. Feels Just Like It Should was the first single, reaching number 8 in the first week in the UK charts. It has become a number 1 hit on the Billboard dance charts in the United States. The single was also certified gold in Japan with selling 100,000 copies. The second single, 7 Days in Sunny June, an absolutely beautiful, breezy summer flop of a great single, was released in the UK on August of 2005, peaking at number 14 on the UK sales charts, or UK singles charts, I should say. The song was also featured in the films The Devil Wears Prada. On November 7th of 2005, Don't Get Hate a Chance was released as the third single from the album. The politically driven video for the track was Jamiroquai's first ever animated short-form music video. It features a Buffalo Man, complete with Buffalo Man hat, sunglasses, and tracksuit. The clip also helped the track score top 20 showings in the UK charts, such as Smash Hits and Hit 40 UK charts, which takes in all the statistic of radio and video airplay as well as sales. Now, this next release from Jamiroquai, which was their only Greatest Hits compilation, would mark the end of their time with Sony Music. The Greatest Hits compilation, called High Times, the Singles, 1993 to 2006, was a compilation album released by Jamiroquai that was released on November 6th of 2006 in the United Kingdom and November 8th, 2006 in Japan. The album was intended to be a collection of the group's singles, but it is more widely known as a collection of the band's best hits, which also include the singles Still This in Time, Half the Man, which was only available on the regular and deluxe Japanese pressings, Light Years, Supersonic, King for a Day, You Give Me Something, as well as omitting the international-only singles The Kids and Black Capricorn Day. This compilation album does also feature 2 newly recorded album songs by Jamiroquai, Runaway and Radio. This album, of course, ended their tumultuous, nearly 8-album commitment with, of course, Sony BMG, ultimately with Jamiroquai leaving. Now, a few years later, Jamiroquai would end up on another record label. Jamiroquai would end up signing with Universal Music in 2009, and their first release, their 7th album, called Rock Dust Light Star, was released in the United Kingdom on November 1st, of 2010 by Universal Music Mercury Records, and then on April 24th, 2 years later, 2012, in the United States by Executive Music Group. The album was recorded at JK's home studio in Buckinghamshire, as well as Hook End Manor in Oxfordshire and Karma Studios in Thailand. The album was written entirely by the band and produced by first-time collaborators Charlie Russell and Brad Spence. The band revealed that the musical style of the new album was more centered on funk and rock. However, frontman JK claimed that the tone and style of the album were hard for him to describe. Promotion of the album began in October of 2010 with a press conference involving band members JK, Derek McKenzie, Sola Kimball, Matt Johnson, Paul Turner, and Rob Harris. They announced that the band would play 2 concerts in Colombia and Brazil to promote the album before discussing the plans for a possible world tour in 2011. In a review for the Daily Telegraph, the album was described as a blistering, poetic, meaty, and reflective, inspiring album. For this album, JK took inspiration from Rod Stewart, Roxy Music, Pink Floyd, and the Rolling Stone in more of a rock and disco phase. And rounding off all the 8 albums of the Jamiroquai album discography, we come to 2017's album Automaton, which would count as the eighth album released by Jamiroquai funk band Jamiroquai, released in March 31st, 2017 through Virgin EMI. This would be the band's first new album in nearly 7 years following Rock Dust Lightstar in 2010. J.K. described the inspiration for Automaton in a recognition of the rise of artificial intelligence and technology in our world and how we humans are beginning to forget more pleasant, simple, elegant things in life and in our environment, including our relationship with one another as human beings. As for the highly anticipated ninth Jamiroquai album, which is hopefully, which between 2020 and 2023, various band members, including Matt Johnson, J.K. himself, alluded on messages of recent Jamiroquai vinyl reissues and radio interviews that the work on the new album had commenced. Speculatively, the Jamley is hoping that the new Jamiroquai album, the ninth Jamiroquai album, will hopefully be out sometime between 2024 to 2025. So let's move on to section 2 of this fourth part of the Beginner's Guide to Jamiroquai and look at the singleography of Jamiroquai's discography. Now, Jamiroquai have cohesively released over 36 single releases from all their 8 studio album output over the last 30 years, in a plethora of formats ranging from CD to vinyl to odd offshoots like dual disc and Sony mini disc. All the single releases were complemented with some of the most inventive, ingenious, memorable front and back cover art, utilizing the band's Buffalo Man logo in various different ranges, from rolling paper for a spliff to wandering the galaxy through black holes. This self-promotional release ingenuity would make them one of the few artists of their era who were very, very creative, not only in their music, among other British band luminaries of the time, including the likes of Radiohead, Blur, and Oasis, and many others. I briefly touched on each one of the notable singles of each one of the 8 album eras of Jamiroquai in section 1 of this episode, but there are a couple of the single releases that were the most memorable. When weighing the importance of the single art and their B-sides, I highly recommend that everybody in the Jamley, go check out the following past single releases from Jamiroquai: When You Gonna Learn, Space Cowboy, Light Years, and Virtual Insanity in your free time. Well, that's it for part 4 of the Beginner's Guide of Jamiroquai, and I hope you're all in the Jamley are enjoying this very informative series going into the history of the band of Jamiroquai, and I hope you get a grasp of all the most important information about Jamiroquai. And coming up in part 5 of the Beginner Guide of Jamiroquai, I will start exploring the outstanding and groundbreaking music videos of Jamiroquai, another invaluable conduit of the band's musical self-expression, which may not have much relevance these days, but it's definitely worth a revisitation by old and new Jamiroquai fans of the online Jamley. Thank you again for enjoying the series. I hope you like and subscribe, and be sure to ding the bell on your YouTube to stay up to date on all the latest new content coming from the Jamiroquai 2000 YouTube channel. I will hopefully have some more content coming very, very soon here on my channel. But as always, this is Jamiroquai 2000. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you again really soon with more episodes of the Beginner's Guide to Jamiroquai. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again, and take care.